intellectual disabilities, and that's mild disability. When I say that a student has a mild intellectual disability, what comes to mind for some of the
mild intellectual abilities, I said?
Disability.
Maybe a student with ADD or ADHD.
Not necessarily.
I guess that's not intellectual, that's more mental.
Sorry.
Dyslexia.
Yeah.
Dyslexia? Okay.
Sure.
I was going to say the same thing, mild dyslexia.
Okay. Dyslexia is when you see your words backwards, right? My sister had that. She used to love butterscotch pudding, except she called it scutterbox when she would write it down. What else? Well, some of the characteristics, and to give you a quick definition out of the book, it's significant limitations on intellectual functioning or adaptive behavior. In other words, being able to think and process things. And adaptive behavior is like doing everyday tasks, tying your shoes, fixing your own food, things like that. Some of the traits that the book listed were a lack of general knowledge about the world, not really understanding. Anybody remember Rain Man?
Yep.
Yeah. How much does a candy bar cost? About $100. How much does a new sports car cost? About $100. You know, really not being able to function on that level. Difficulty with abstract ideas. Is it necessarily a disability if we don't grasp abstract concepts? Because all students are going to demonstrate that at one time or another, aren't they? All right. Poor reading and language skills. Is it necessarily a mental disability or intellectual disability for poor reading skills at the high school level?
Not necessarily. Some of the smartest people in the world can't read.
You know, it's just a matter of what you've come up with, and it's, you know, that foundation of learning that gets built early on really develops. Poor learning and memory strategies. And we talked about this with the metacognition, you know, knowing how you process and things. But these are some of the things that are really prominent in students with intellectual disabilities. And mild disabilities is categorized, so to speak, with an IQ between 50 and 70. And that's the mild section. And the reason that we bring this up is you are going to have students in your classrooms at one time or another with these traits. And poor developed learning and memory strategies, well, that was a bad one for me. I really don't think that I was diagnosed with this, but every student can learn memory strategies. Just keep that in mind. Underdeveloped motor skills. These kids are running with 4 cylinders when everybody else has a V8. Is that right? Wrong motor skills. Okay, sorry. Wasn't a good joke, but I told it anyway. Immature interpersonal skills. This is a real big sign. A lot of these students act very childlike and have a childlike view of the world. And so that's going to be a big indicator for you as teachers. Things to look for, but all of these are things to look for. When they start all adding up, you know, that's when you start thinking about does this child have a mild intellectual disability. Page 142 of the text is a real good resource. I didn't make a PowerPoint just because I want you guys to be able to discuss a little bit and not really focus on what's on the board. I will put a PowerPoint together and put it on the website for you so that you've got all these points in there. But a couple of things that I wanted to bring out was sources of stress for these students. And you're going to find that stress at the high school level especially is going to play a key role in the learning environment. If a student's stressed out, they're really not going to learn very well. real good article that I found by Solus and Floridas that was done last year about Greek students and sources of stress. And we've got a really good endpoint on this for teachers. But what are some of the things that you would think would cause stress for students? Anybody?
In general?
In general.
Pressure of grades.
Pressure of grades.
Well, having a disability, maybe.
Okay, well, the disability itself, okay.
Money issues, maybe your family's poor and you're trying to figure out how to live, kind of thing, I guess.
Okay. All right, now what about the student with mild development or intellectual disability? What sort of sources of stress do you think they would have?
Like stigmas from other people, like being judged.
Okay, how the other students look at them?
Yeah. Being compared to your classmates.
Okay. What else?
Maybe expectations if they don't know about it, or if they're not diagnosed with it.
Okay, about the illness itself?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything that you can think of that would specifically relate to the classroom, though?
They have a hard time working with other people because they don't have much general knowledge and poor interpersonal skills.
Okay. Very good. Definitely. Well, the study found that the highest reported source of stress, and they used, they interviewed the students and they also interviewed the teachers. But the highest stress indicator was practices and methods of evaluation by the teacher. How they're scored, how they're graded. They're worried about their grades. And a lot of these students do very well. It's just, you know, how we evaluate them, the types of questions we ask them, do we put them on the spot in front of their classmates and things like that. So the means of evaluation we need to be aware of. And the other thing is judgment and comments by classmates. Like the two Katie's said, it's how the other classmates view them, and am I going to be able to keep up with what's going on in the classroom? Those are the two highest causes of stress. What do you think the least stressful thing about school and education in general was? Any ideas at all? I want to give it to you. Almost as good as lunch. I told you we had something really good coming out of this. Relationship with the teacher was the least stressful thing about education. And it was the support and the encouragement and the acceptance that they get from their teachers that make them want to come to school. So keep that in mind when you have these kids in your classroom, that you are the biggest bright spot they have as far as their education goes. The other thing I want you to think about and look at is depressive moods in students. Depression for high school students, whether they have disabilities or not, whether they have intellectual disabilities, physical handicaps, depression plays a big role in how we look at the world. I'm not going to ask you if you've ever dealt with depression, but I am going to tell you from my own experiences that I have. I spent over 20 years in construction, had a wonderful career, had a great life, wonderful family, and an accident one day destroyed my entire world. And I went through a time of great depression. And I've seen it in high school kids that I've worked with, and especially kids that don't see a bright future for themselves, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's an intellectual disability. These students are going to be at risk of depression, and learning the signs of depression would be something that would be useful for you all. But as far as how it relates to the students with intellectual disabilities. There was research done in 2001 by a gentleman named Hyndman, and it was depressive moods in students with mild intellectual disabilities, and found that they had 121 students that were placed in a specialized school, and 189 students that were in regular mainstream schools. And actually the students who had a higher level of depression was in the specialized school. The mainstream students seemed to be less depressed and interacted, you know, as far as their education goes, better. They did feel like they had a lower level of development or social skills in the mainstream, and I think that goes back to, you know, how they view pressures by their classmates. But depression in both groups of students is going to be something that you may want to look for. But how does this affect math and science teaching? One of the reports that is listed on the website is the effects of cognitive-based instruction on mathematics problem solving, and it was fantastic. I apologize, I need to do some more study and see if I can find if this thing has been repeated, but I just loved it. And the two strategies that the study did, they had 3 groups of students, and one group received regular, just the instruction that everybody else had been getting all along. One group used what was called cognitive strategies for instruction in solving word problems, and the other group used what was called worked example strategies. The worked example is pretty much what Katie outlined earlier that we talked about the other day. It says master the rules for solving problems, sort problems into categories, you know, what type of problem is this, and then be able to recognize the connection between new problems and problems that you already know how to work. And the students who did this was the worked example problems. The students who received this type of instruction at the end of the year when they did their testing, they did an immediate test right at the end of the semester, and then they waited a period, and I can't remember the time when it right off, but they came back and did a delayed test. In the immediate test, they scored 12% higher than the regular student control group. The delayed group scored 29% higher. You know, when they waited, the retention level was higher. The cognitive strategies group, here was the strategy for teaching. They read the problem out loud, then they paraphrased the problem, they put it in their own words, they visualized the problem, stated the problem itself, you know, just exactly what is this. Then they hypothesized, you know, what is really going on. This is the process that we used the other day with the roller coaster. Estimated an answer, you know, what do you think is going to be the answer. Then they did the calculations, and then they went back and did a self-assessment and self-check. In the immediate testing, it was 11% higher. In the delayed testing, 31% higher than the control group. So the retention level with these two, you know, was a lot greater. And we're out of time, but like I said, I'll put all this back up on the website for you so you'll have